Okay, welcome to part 2 of the PreSonus StudioLive 32S's mixing capabilities in surround sound. On part 1, we looked at a 7.1 surround sound setup with the auxiliary outputs on the mixer controlling the 7.1 surround sound bed output to the speakers. This time on part 2, we're going to look at the AVB networked audio setup inside of a Mac computer, how to set that up, as well as looking at the ProTools system so I can show you how the surround sound bed is mapped out to listen. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, before we get into the surround sound setup in Pro Tools, we need to look at the AVB setup first, which is the networked audio setup inside of the system on the Mac. And how that's physically connected is an Ethernet port on the back of my Mac is connected to the AVB port, which is the audio network port on the PreSonus StudioLive 32S. And that's how you connect your AVB. Now, on the software side, we need to open up AVB. To do that, you're going to go down here to your Launchpad. We're going to go look for audio MIDI setup. Open that up. And now you're going to see the setup here. So once you plug in your Ethernet cable to the PreSonus StudioLive mixer, you're going to need to wait a few moments. It doesn't just pop up immediately, but give it about 10 to 15 seconds, and you'll see this audio unit 0 pop up. Now, you're going to want to leave the clock source alone, though you could pick the Mac system clock. I leave it be. And then your stream is going to be channel 1 through 8. In my system, I'm doing 7.1 surround sound monitoring. So I'm going to have 8 channels, right? You have 7 speakers and then 1 channel for the LFE. So my channel, 1 is left, 2 is right, 3 is the center, 4 is my LFE, 5 is my left side speaker, 6 is my right side speaker, 7 and 8 would be my 2 left and right rear speakers. Okay. In order to set up the speakers themselves, you're going to have to go right here to configure speakers. So when you configure the speaker, you click on it, and you're going to get a diagram here in a photo of what your system would look like. So in my 7.1 rear surround sound system, this is what it looks like. You can also change how you set up your surround sound. Okay, so you can set it up in any way you want. When you install the Dolby Atmos surround sound renderer, you'll get these options here for Atmos, and that is how you select that. Now, the other part is setting up the actual speakers. So on my system, I have all audio channels enabled to be whatever I want them to be. So if I configure them differently on the mixing board, no matter what I do, I can choose which one I want. Okay. So for the left speaker, I have the first set of speakers selected 1 through 8, and then I choose 1 for my left speaker, which would be my left on the front. And then the same thing with the right speaker, which would be number 2, and then so forth and so on. Okay, once you're done with that, go ahead and hit apply and then done. Okay, and we can go ahead and close this out and go back to Pro Tools. So let's get Pro Tools back open. And I'm showing you a 5.1 surround sound bed, but it's the same thing for 7.1. When you are setting this up in Pro Tools, you need to have the bus set up correctly so that it outputs to the correct speaker. Now, just because you do this does not mean you're going to hear surround sound. We're going to go into another step where we map the inside of the mixer's digital patching system to output correctly based on what we do here. So as you can see on the 5.1 output, let's pay attention here. I created a 5.1 bed, and then I outputted the channels here. So L means left, C means center, R means right, LS with the lowercase s and the uppercase L is left side. Same thing with the RS, it's right side. And then the same thing for your rears. So your rear speakers would be down here. Okay. So That is how the speakers are outputted on my 7.1, but you can adapt it for 5.1 where this may be the rear speakers and not the sides. Okay. So that's how that is done. Um, what that allows us to do inside of Pro Tools, I'm going to close this really quick, and that's going to allow us to output in a bed. So if on my print track down here, you can see I have all of these channels, and these channels are mapped to what comes out of the center, what comes out of the left, the right, the rear, the sides. Everything is mapped out here. And it's mapping out because inside of the tracks here, I have and this is for a film that I've done. So you'll have a music bed and you'll have, other music, SFX, all that stuff. And I can have it play out of certain speakers. So let's just say the reverb is playing out of the rear speakers. So I make it come out of the bus LSR, which is my left side rear. RSR, same thing, right side rear. And if I wanted it to come out of the sub, I can make it just come out of the sub. And that's how that works. So output wise, you're not outputting from tracks to physical outputs. You're outputting from tracks into buses, and then the bus is mapped out to the physical output. And I'll do an entirely separate video on how to set up the surround sound from scratch inside of Pro Tools. That's a deeper learning path that I need to show you, but this is just an overview of how that's set up in Pro Tools. And if you already know how to set up surround sound mixes in Pro Tools, well, you're light years ahead and you don't have to wait on that tutorial. Okay. So let's switch over to looking at the StudioLive 32S's mapped speakers in the auxiliary and how I'm mapping those channels out to surround sound in the digital patching system. We're going to move over to that system now. Okay, so we have universal control set up. We're going to double click on our mixer right here. And that's going to open up our digital mixing dashboard here. And in order to get where we need to go up to the gear icon on the top right-hand corner, right there. We're going to click that, and then we're going to go over to our digital patching, okay? So let's get into digital patching right here on the last option before you hit the power button. Just right there on the top on the right hand, and you click that. And then we're going to look at how the channels are set up. So you know that physically I have, if you've looked at part 1, you know that my mix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all mapped out to separate speakers, okay? So notice the symbol around mix 1 is actually a network symbol, and that's telling us that we are in networked audio mode for that channel output. And same thing here and so forth. But how's that mapped out on the patch? Well, let's go look at the patch. We're going to look at AVB sends. So let's click on that tab right in the middle. Click on that, and you'll see here's how our mapping is for AVB networked audio outputs. So let's go up to our chart, and let's go all the way to the mix outputs. Let's just correct this. I had it in a different format before. So let's change this and this. All right. You can see AVB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all mapped out to mix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That means that my AVB 1, which is my left speaker in the front, my AVB 2, my right speaker in the front, and so forth, LFE and rear and side channels, all that stuff is mapped out to the mixes. This does not work unless you set it up correctly in the AVB setup inside of the audio MIDI setup in the Mac. So if you don't set that up, you won't hear this correctly. So you can set this all up, no sound will come out. All right. And that's exactly how it's set up. You may be asking how to still use your main outputs or any other outputs. Well, it's the same thing. You can still patch other outputs like main left and right if you want to go to your monitor speakers, things like that. So you can set up those kind of routings here. And it's very easy to do so. You just click a button and it's routed. It's done. Okay. Let's say you've used all of these for your surround sound channels and you want to still have a stereo main out. Well, you can do that by selecting the 15, 16, 17, or 18, or whatever the case may be. You can do that through there and then map it over to the main. You're just going to click it. So you just find it and boom, that's it. And then the same thing for the right, boom. All right. I have mine mapped out to my headphones. So I have a headphone mixer from PreSonus called an HP4. And on the 15th and 16th track, I am pushing audio to that box, which allows me to have 4 headphone outputs for listening in stereo. And that is, something I have set up for personal preferences. Another thing I wanted to make note of is that even though we're set up with AVB networked audio, I still have the USB 2.0 cable plugged in, and this is an advantage over PC. PC cannot use multiple audio cards at once, nor can it use multiple audio connections at once. It doesn't even have AVB on Windows. So if you're looking at USB sends, you can see my USB sends are mapped out and they're still working. And I'm actually using some of my USB sends to send audio into the mixing board right now as I'm recording. Okay, so that is the setup on Pro Tools, and that is the setup inside of the system itself and on the PreSonus StudioLive 32S. Okay, so I want to show you a program that is called Emergo StudioLive. And what this is for is locking your channels together so that you get even output throughout all speakers when you're listening to the output, okay? And how that does it is it actually connects via the MIDI port in AVB mode, and it locks the IP address into its system for the client and the StudioLive. And when I mix and move the faders, it actually locks the faders together. So here's an example. Now I've set up the system already, and it's reflecting my setup in the 7.1 surround sound configuration. But okay, so this is what happens when you have the faders locked with Emergo Live or Emergo StudioLive. I'm going to move the master volume up and down, and it's going to move all of my faders at once. And I'm doing that it moves all the faders at once, and I'm doing that with the mouse, just moving the master volume up and down. So when you're listening back, you can hear it all evenly. Very cool. And I hope that covered a lot of questions that you may have. Like I said, I do need to do a separate tutorial on how to set up a actual bed inside of Pro Tools, and that is going to take a deeper tutorial to do. I will get to it. I will get you all that information, and we'll go from there. All right. So I hope this tutorial helped y'all out. Stay tuned for the next one. Please like and subscribe.